Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2024 sci-fi sequel Dune Part 2. The film is directed and co-written by Denis Villeneuve and it stars Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Dave Bautista, Christopher Walken, Florence Pugh, Stellan Skarsgård, and I could go on. Incredible cast. Right, this is of course the second part to Dune Part 1 that came out in 2021, and that was one of my favourite films of that year. I thought it was very close to being a masterpiece. Well, it was. It was just incredible. And this time round, this follows directly on from the end of the first film. And if you remember at the end of the first film, Paul Atreides has lost everything. His father's been assassinated. His House Atreides, have all been massacred. There's only him, really, and his mother, Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson. And the Fremen, led by Javier Bardem, have taken them in. And agreed to kind of keep them safe. However, they have to learn the Fremen's ways, and it soon becomes apparent that there's a bit of an issue amongst the Fremen. Half of them believe that Paul is the prophecy. There is a prophecy that someone will come from the outside, learn their ways, and lead them to the Promised Land. And there are some of these Fremen who are quite religious that believe quite strongly that he is the one. And there are others, more modern Fremen, if you like, that don't think like that at all. They think he's a bit of a pain in the backside, really. They'd rather he wasn't there. But one of those initially is Zendaya's character, Chani. But they end up falling in love, if you know anything about the story. And then Paul Atreides leads the Fremen to take out the Harkonnens and disrupt their mine productions. Right, what are my thoughts on Dune Part 2? Well, simply put, I was, hinting at the fact that I thought the first one was a masterpiece. There is no doubt in my mind that the second one is absolutely a masterpiece. As two films go, I think you're going to find it difficult to find two better films that complement each other so wonderfully. Really, I can't really give you any flaws. From my perspective anyway, I couldn't see any flaws in this film. There are maybe some that are not necessarily fans of more thoughtful sci-fi, more adult grown-up sci-fi, that might struggle with the pacing here. But my suggestion to you would be, if you watched Dune Part 1 and you wasn't that keen, then don't bother with this, because this isn't going to win you over either. I think Denis Villeneuve is an absolute visionary. Such a fabulous director. He genuinely is an artist, and what he puts on screen is so beautiful to look at. It is like looking at a painting, really, and he really is fabulous at what he does. But not only can he give us striking visuals, this film is complemented with CGI that is done properly. And what I mean by that is CGI, I think we can all agree, is really overused these days, and it looks a mess in most movies when they just, these movies that cost like 300, 400 million to make, and then they end up making half that money back these days. Because they just pissing all the money down the drain and just giving it to a CGI company, and they're farting out these special effects that aren't particularly impressive. This is the perfect example of how to make special effects work to enhance your movie. And that's exactly what they do. They are striking to look at. And then you've got one of the strongest casts that I can remember. Now, Timothée Chalamet is, slowly growing on me as an actor. I mean, he is really starting to get, prominent roles now. Obviously, I think that's fair to say. there was some question, I think, and probably we all had this question, that he was the perfect choice to play Paul Atreides, certainly in the first film, because the Paul Atreides, if you like, from the books was a teenager, really, a bit of a scrawny teenager, bit of a daddy's boy in a lot of ways. And he played that, this kind of fragile young man in the first film that had to toughen up. And this time round, he had to give a really different performance because you've got this guy who, once he's with the Fremen, he's starting to have, this young man is starting to have these dreams and stuff because the spice is affecting him, and he can see what his future kind of looks like. And he doesn't look good. And if you know the story of Paul Atreides and the books, you know what's coming. He essentially becomes a villain in many people's eyes in the books. So he's got to kind of portray this real sense of authority and confidence and arrogance as the film progresses, to the point where it almost tips it over the edge with his performance, in the sense of becoming unlikable at times. The more he's infected with the spice, and when he drinks the water of life and stuff. And I was so impressed with his performance. He went from being this gentle young man who, was a bit lost, to this angry, vengeful warrior. And I thought he was excellent. And then you've got everybody else in this film who all stand out. I think Javier Bardem, who didn't get an awful lot to do in the first film, shines here. A really wonderful performance by him, and quite a fun performance by him. He has a few light moments in the film. Rebecca Ferguson has a similar transition because she becomes like the high priestess, if you like, for the Fremen, and so she kind of changes, and she's pregnant. And then probably a lot of people you're going to hear talking about Austin Butler's performance as Fade, the character that Sting played in the first film. Wow. Again, another young man who is getting really prominent roles and has got a massively bright future ahead of him. Great performance by Fade. Really villainous, nasty, horrible character. And then you've got other characters that have smaller roles, like Florence Pugh, Christopher Walken, who plays the Emperor. But again, certainly Florence Pugh's character has a bigger part to play if we get more of these films. Now, at one point, there was some question mark as to whether we were going to get this film, because when the first one came out, it was like COVID time, really, and it didn't really have a massively extended cinema run, and it made enough, and then it kind of went, was it HBO Max, something like that? But it made enough for them to kind of green-light the sequel. Well, I hope this one blows everybody's socks off at the box office, because not only is this a massively impressive visual treat, it is one of the best science fiction films I've seen since Blade Runner 2049. I thought Blade Runner 2049, which again was Denis Villeneuve, was completely flawless. I thought it was incredible. And then he topped himself again with Dune Part 1, and he's topped himself again here with Dune Part 2. Please let him make more of these Dune movies. Let him finish the story, if you like. I mean, he won't get to do all the books. I'd be staggered if he did. If he did do that, he'll just be making Dune movies, I would imagine, for the rest of his career. But if he makes them as fantastic, stunning, and impressive as this, I'd be up for that. I've always been a fan of Dune. I'd read the books when I was a young man, not all of them, but I've read the books, and that was because I went to the cinema to see the David Lynch version of Dune, and I was only 12 at the time, and everybody was high on sci-fi at the time, with Star Wars and riding high and stuff, and so anything sci-fi related, everybody was charging to the cinema to see him, really. But we all know that the 80s version, flopped. But I remember having quite a good time at the cinema with the David Lynch Dune, and so it's always had that, I've always had that connection with the Dune franchise, if that's what you want to call it, and it's always meant quite a lot to me. So when I knew that Denis Villeneuve was making the Dune film, Dune Part One, as it's now known, I was stupidly excited because you just knew how talented he was. I don't think I don't think he ever could make a poor film, if I'm being particularly honest. He is an incredible filmmaker. He's got an incredible cast in this film, and he's delivered an absolutely outstanding piece of cinema that I think I'm going to struggle to top this year in regards to my favourite film. I really do. I know it's very early in the year to say that, but this just blew me away to the point where I'm going to be off back to see this one maybe 2 or 3 times before it finishes its cinema run, and I can't wait to add it to my Blu-ray collection. So yeah, fans of the first one, you are going to absolutely love this. It'll give you everything that you want. I love the way as well they percolate this story of him kind of resisting his destiny. And this is the thing you see, obviously in the David Lynch film, he couldn't let the story breathe, which is the luxury that Denis Villeneuve has had by doing it in 2 parts. And this time round, he's got this real inner battle, Paul, in a sense of he doesn't want to commit to his destiny because he can see what's coming. And I really like that. And I love the way they kind of built that friction into the Fremen as well, that some believed in him, some didn't. The fact that Lady Jessica was kind of sneaking around the Fremen and kind of, bigging him up sort of thing, trying to get his legend spread. And I just thought it was really clever how they did that, and they just let it simmer and percolate, and it just worked. I just honestly, I can't compliment this film enough, and I could probably talk about this film for another 15-20 minutes. It's that good, but I don't want to spoil too much for you. So go to the cinema, enjoy it, and let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this film. And I will, of course, be back with plenty more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.